Greetings and salutations, everyone. Welcome back to the Inn of Planar Crossroads, and as always, welcome back to our Around the Hearth discussions. We, this time, are trying out using Discord, and hopefully it's going all right. We'll find out when I edit, but, you know. Before we start into our chats, and before we start into specifically this chat about telling epic stories without branching into huge epic levels, we will be doing announcements, and for announcements for the Inn of Planar Crossroads, this is coming out in November? Yeah, I think so. I think this should come out in November. So by November, we will have... Yes, when this comes out, we will have just finished up our second and last of the year collaboration with, or at least filming portion of the collaboration with Avenue Studios. I was not planning to go up twice this year, but I could. They were gonna branch him back in. They're branching the character back in that was out, and I'm having to be like, no, we can't leave it that way. We got to finish the story. And it's like, yeah, it was all a ploy. It was all a ploy to get me back up there. Those they're getting me back up there. But
darn Yankees up here.
Damn Yankees! They yanked me back. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Rim shot. Anyway, before I get too distracted with puns, other announcements. Next month, from when this is coming out, will be the end of the year, and at the end of the year, and the beginning of next year, we always put out a New Year's video, which is reflecting upon last year that has just passed, and the goal for the next year. So that's the plan for this time. I will have an announcement for the next milestone that we're going to be shooting for, and it will come out then. So keep an eye on that. I'm still trying to decide what I want to give away as part of that, but it should be a milestone that if we are able to reach it, will make a large difference in what we're able to produce here on the channel. So just keep an eye out for it. So, that's everything I've got. Do you have anything for over there at Avenue Studios?
Just the basics. You can find us on YouTube, Rumble, and podcasts. We are live streaming on YouTube now, Wednesdays, 9 p.m. Actually, last Wednesday, we shot the Fallout Fort Smith, so you can find that on our channel. Adam ran it. We had Great Mustache playing with Kristen and I, so that was a blast. I loved it. Actually, the first time Kristen and I got to play a married couple, so that was fun. Yeah, we were just an old, grumpy married couple. It was perfect.
As you do.
Yep. And I think the other big thing is Adam comes up at the end of this month. I know this will have already passed, but we'll be doing a special movie night, and we will live stream, I think, a little before that. So, when this goes, we'll be able to find that live stream on the channel and just get a little taste of what movie nights are like. This one will be especially big because Adam's up, so a lot of people are going to come over to the studio in person on the team, and we're going to watch over the garden wall. So if you support Avenue Studios, you can gain access to our movie nights that we do with patrons, and it's a lot of fun. So I think, yeah, those are the big things happening on our end. So Pathfinder 2nd Edition live streams every other Wednesday, and then something random nerdy on the off Wednesdays for live streaming.
Yeah. And
that's Avenue Studios.
All right. And that was Dan. Didn't say his name.
Yes. Sorry. Oh.
Okie dokie. And let me see. Did you have any announcements before you branched into a shout out of any kind, Levi?
I guess the closest thing to announcement is I did get the dice from the giveaway. They're quite nice. They're fun aesthetically, and I like all the funky numbers. By which I mean that they're fun shapes, and you get like a D30, D60, D24. Like, it's a good time.
That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, in personal stuff, other people are going to be getting pies from Levi's pies, but, you know. Doesn't seem. So I'm going. So honestly, size-wise, they don't need a shout-out as much, but I've just been listening to them a lot. Lighthouse Horror. If I remember correctly, I believe... I'm not sure if Lighthouse... There's another horror reading channel I listen to, but it's got good ambiance, good voice acting, and I've got to say, one of the nice things about shows like this is it gives you a lot of inspiration for Halloween-y style games and settings. And I did it correctly. I sent you the link to their main page.
Oh, that's
the most recent one.
Was.
Yes. The most recent video, a parents start acting strange after they move out onto an island.
Oh, so these are original?
No, I believe with permission of authors. Sometimes I believe there might be some original in there. Some of them are just creepypasta, but they're generally selected to be pretty good stories. And the permission of authors is asked for before reading it.
Cool beans.
Cool.
And also, sonically, it's generally not too startling, so it's not bad to go to sleep to, if you don't mind a little or want to sleep.
Fair enough.
Also known as part of how I use their channel.
Views are views.
Yep.
Oh, and the thing is, I go back, and if the start of it sounded really good, I go back and I rewatch it the next day, because I only got to listen to about half of it. For real.
That's awesome.
Yep. Well, see, you can always fall asleep to things you want to fall asleep to, and then do just what you're talking about, especially if you're using the watch later feature on YouTube. I don't think enough people use that. But,
Oh, yeah.
All right. So that was our shout out then. Lighthouse Horror. So,
yeah.
Enjoy. And if you do end up listening to it, let us know in the comments down below. Because I know that there was a few stories that came out of the creepypasta craze that went on that actually were pretty good. So, very scary stories to tell in the dark type of stuff.
Yeah. I like that their production is just too intense for trying to go to sleep. It's well produced, but it's not like a horror story by a campfire. It's very much so like a horror podcast vibe, which is a good thing. And it's if you're sitting up and you want to actively focus and listen to it in that sense, I still will watch them, but I don't have playlists of theirs to my homepage to play while I try to go to bed, like I do for Lighthouse Horror. But okay.
Okie dokie. So there is our shout out for today. Let's see. I think that we are ready to start in on our discussion. So pull up a seat, dear traveler. Sit down, warm yourself by the fire if it's cool enough where you are, and grab your preferred beverage. Join us as we discuss epic stories without epic levels. So, for those new to tabletop and other things that this might apply for, usually when someone says epic levels, you're talking within 5 or even at the cap of a level, of a level cap per game. So, using the example of Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder, they're usually capped at about level 20. Everybody kind of understands that the classes stop gaining new abilities at level 20 and all of those things. So this is the peak of what a class can do at level 20. Now, it's very tempting to use that as your baseline for what epicness is. But I think that is a mistake, personally. And I will explain that when I go. But does anybody else want to start before I go right in and just start blabbing?
I'd be interested to hear what you say, but I don't want to speak for Levi, of course.
I mean, I've got the... I think it would be a good idea for you to go first, because you are thinking more like the philosophy of TTRPG storytelling, where mine was more just a specific method to, like, do something that feels epic without having to have your character be epic in power.
Okay. So, I will begin us then, per the request of my dear guests. Using epic levels and taking epic levels in as a story point or as just a mechanic within the game is fine. But the problem arises with perhaps the scale of the threat having to go up and up and up and up, and all of that having to happen. And that can lead to power scaling that really can harm your story experience. Now, this is mainly meant, at least my portion of it, is mainly meant around the, like Levi said, philosophy of storytelling in a TTRPG or a TRPG. That you want to tell something really cool that's happening, and D&D really is heroic fantasy, so that's very much what people get used to thinking about when they think about TRPGs. But it didn't used to be. Used to, you were lucky to get out alive and those things to make it through. And while that's also good, there's also that OSR and just old school in general philosophy of making things deadly. You don't have to do that either for it to be epic. Because something that I have learned, and it's probably heavily influenced the way I'll approach the discussion, is that going with a narrative system like Open Legend compared to Pathfinder or Dungeons and Dragons or even some other ones like Dragon Age and that TRPG, and a lot of them that you find out there, the openness and the variety that you can do with something like Open Legend or GURPS or those generic settings, or even, I suppose you could do it with Savage Worlds as well, those that have a more open design. You can describe things however you want to describe them. And the example that I'll use is one, I'll put myself out there and I will say, I'm doing this with the kids in Adventure Academia. If you've been following along with Adventure Academia, you would know that we have the kids facing Grum this time, who is a green dragon, an ancient green dragon. Now, mechanically, they're level 2. They shouldn't be facing a green dragon. But that doesn't really matter, does it? Those are just numbers on dice and on paper. That's just numbers to make math happen. What happens in the story is completely up to you and your players. So they are literally assaulted and made their way into a giant mech fortress dragon that was made of wood and stone and metal. And they did that at level 2. So how does that work? It works because it's not about what their level is, it's about what the story is telling. You're approaching this and you're saying, this is the story we're telling. And I feel confident in saying that most people, even when running modules, don't actually run modules and settings exactly like they're meant to be, just pen to paper. This is what it is in the story. Because you can't, because everybody plays differently. And so you're already shaping things and molding things in the Dungeons and Dragons setting to make it feel right. to make it feel appropriate and keep verisimilitude with your character, with your players and their characters. So if you're going to do that, why not just tell the story you want to tell? Because the mechanics are irrelevant to whether a story is epic or not. So that's kind of my spiel on that, and how keeping that mindset and that philosophy behind it can be helpful for running a game that feels epic, but doesn't have to use epic levels to do so. So, did any of you guys want to bounce off of any of that, or going into anything else?
I'm actually thinking the pragmatic ideas Levi might have would be.
Yeah.
Because,
so I.
Sorry, I was just going to throw out that the first thing I'm thinking of too is that expectation that you're talking about. As long as everyone at the table is synced up with expectations, that should be easy to pull off, which goes back to, like we've discussed section 0 before, communication. So I don't know if that leads in for you, Levi, or what you're thinking.
So in this case, I think that first thing first, what you're discussing I think can work very well, can be good for a group, but that's not what I was imagining was the topic, I guess I would say. When I was imagining using epic stories at not levels, I was more putting the gravitas and the emotional weight at the lower quote-unquote power levels.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right. Well, in the sense of like if we go with like Lord of the Rings, Frodo Baggins is not a very high-level character, generally speaking. He's competent, but he's not going through and slaying armies and then hopping up and dragging dragons down, and like that's beyond the scale. But he's still, over the course of what's happening in the world, was epic, as opposed to a like reflavoring to add epicness to the direct actions of the characters and the monsters to kind of scale the math into a reasonable, and because let's be real, in a lot of these systems the math gets weirder and weirder and less functional the higher level you go, because they're not balanced for those levels very effectively. Yeah. And there are so many options by those levels, it's very hard to actually appropriately balance, just because there are so many choices. And like, just doing the math on what all choices you could have made makes it difficult to wrap your head around. So, the practical example, I was actually going to take something from Pathfinder 2nd Edition.
Okay.
Right. So, and apply it to monsters at like a lower power level. So, they have a way they run Kaiju. You do not fight in Pathfinder 2nd Edition.
Okay.
They have a bunch of individual events that you survive and deal with, and can maybe convince the Kaiju to leave your area. Right. So, like, they have got, for a couple of their things put up, like, the sweeping tail of a Kaiju is an event.
Okay.
In this case, I was imagining, as opposed to you having a direct fight with a dragon, you break it down into, okay, the current actions we are doing right now, as a team, is avoiding the dragon's fire. It's... And breaking it down into, like, if we want to use other systems concepts, skill challenges. Interact with that, and that was a way to take weaker characters and have them interact with something that was outside of their quote-unquote power level.
Right. And that's actually something I've been doing with the Adventure Academia, because the story has to go so fast.
Okay.
To get to where they're going. We're telling an epic story, but the story is told a lot through, because I've only got like 30 to 45 minutes with the kids as a whole. We have to tell the story in between. If you were doing it for a full gaming crew, you wouldn't necessarily do it this way. But because I do with them, there's a lot of challenge events. They didn't fight their way all the way through the cairn, the golden cairn, when they went through it. They instead had several challenge events, challenge rolls that they rolled that you could do it that way, to roll to... I guess the best way to describe it is how I did it this last time. They were going through they were inside the dragon fortress mech thing, the ancient dragon fortress mech thing. And instead of having them fight through wave after wave of goblin, even though that's epic, like them slicing through goblins and freeing those entrapped NPCs and stuff, they can't do that in a timely manner. So instead I said, okay, everybody roll what you're going to be doing in combat. What is the character going to do in combat? And then they rolled that, and that acted like a combat challenge event, like you're talking about with the Kaiju. And then the next thing they did was, all right, you have, through those successes or failures, you have found out how hard it was to get through the fortress. Then the next rolls were perception rolls to make their way through the fortress following the clues. The next ones were how they were going to breach a door that had to be breached to get to the heart of the stronghold. And so what that does is it keeps the story is still epic, and everybody's still using things that their character can do. But especially going back to the Lord of the Rings and your example there, the only epic level NPC would be Gandalf. And that's because he's a literal Maiar. So it's harder to get higher level than he was. I mean, he managed it, but that's because he was an XP stealer. But anyway, that's beside the point. The Hobbit, and even when you look at even Legolas, even though he's a couple thousand years old or something like that, he still wasn't immortal. He still wasn't untouchable. Yeah. And
like he's like a well-built archer fighter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe ranger, somewhere in there. But not. He had to take his time to kill an elephant. He didn't just kill it while doing elephant is a weak word here, but
an oliphant.
Yeah.
Also, that's movie Legolas.
Technically that is movie Legolas.
That's true.
We'll give it to him. It's a cool It's a cool scene.
Yeah.
Well,
but I guess my point is, even movie Legolas isn't per se epic levels.
Right.
Now I would call him heroic levels. He's like a D&D character. Yeah. He really is.
Like I said, mid levels. Like he's like level 10, 11 maybe.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So you run into that, and you can still tell those really cool epic stories without touching those epic levels. Because, as we've been discussing, those epic levels get wonky. It can be difficult for the GM to balance. It can also be difficult for the players to really master their character. And it's one of the reasons that they're not as fine-tuned up at that level is because most people never see those levels. You see those levels mostly in one-shots or some shots, and that's fine.
Campaign ending.
Yeah.
If you're lucky. Get to that part. I've had literally one campaign that lasted long enough for us to get the whole conceit of the campaign. We, from day one, called it our level 20 campaign. Because that was the goal of it from day one. Yeah. We will keep playing this thing until we hit level 20.
That's fair. You don't have a lot of groups that are able to keep that up. And it's no fault of the group necessarily.
And it was hard for us.
Yeah.
We lost a player and gained a new one in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's not that those aren't rewarding. It's not that you shouldn't play at epic levels. It's just that you shouldn't let those epic levels restrict you from telling epic tales and sharing epic experiences with your friends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm intrigued. There's like two aspects for going. I'm intrigued by both of them because I do like, especially when Levi you were talking about the Lord of the Rings. I was thinking the books, especially because they're even more grounded than the Peter Jackson films, and that does kind of go back to the like Conan the Barbarian day styles of the old games.
Yeah.
And it would be, I haven't, because of coming into it later, just because of my age and timing with stuff, I'm interested in trying some of that again, of that not being heroic. So I'm really interested in that. And then on the flip side, with what Adam was saying too, is the idea of flavoring it so that it's epic. And having done Open Legend a lot, I can see that easily. I could play Open Legend in level 1 and never get bored personally, because it has just the right amount of epicness for me. You usually have like you're rolling 2d6 and a d20 for some stat. So, but then you're still weak enough where you really have detrimental flaws. So I'm kind of curious from your guys' experience how you would handle that in something more structured like D&D and Pathfinder. What tweaks, if any, do you need to do mechanically?
Well, I think one of the biggest things you have to ask as a question when you're thinking about that is, are we playing in that setting or are we using those rules? Because there's a difference. Like you can use the Starfinder, Pathfinder, D&D rules, but you may not be playing in that setting. And if you're not playing in that setting, it doesn't really matter if you're going to be obeying the lore that they've set up for this thing or that thing, or how wizards get their powers. Maybe all wizards have to have focus, or all mages are the same, and you just kind of pick a flavor with your sorcerer or wizard or witch or however. And that makes a big difference. So in homebrew, it is way easier to tell epic stories without epic levels, because there's no pre-existing thing preventing you, restraining you from saying, oh, well, this happens because you came in and slayed the demi-lich. But wait, we're only like level 3. Oops. Well, no. They can go slay a demi-lich at level 3 if they want to. It's like, some people, there are systems that, Easy D6 recently came out this year by GM Scotty. Or GM Scotty, I forget which it is. But Easy D6. It's a party game, I guess. You can run a campaign through it too, where you just use D6s, and it's not meant to be heavy. It's meant to be fun. It's meant to pick up, and you can level up, and you can do things, but it's not really solely about that. It's about having some fun with friends and picking it up and playing it. And you still feel epic when you can beat a demi-lich or something like that in a game like that, because all you're doing is flavoring it that way. The sixes, the dice, are just there to present a instead of it just being a story that someone's telling, you're all telling together. That's all the dice facilitate, is that randomness necessary to present a interesting conflict or a lack of resolution to those conflict, all while entertaining you.
Yeah, so it would seem to me the biggest hurdle, probably if you're using a more well-known system, is like I said before, is establishing that. So at the table, there's the expectations of that. Of, we're going to reflavor this, we're using these numbers, but we're making this our own thing, which I think could be really cool as long as everyone's on board with it. And because that's pretty much, like, for me also coming from a lot of Open Legend, and I like Cogent too, which are just, blank slates. That's what I'm just used to. You flavor the numbers, the numbers are just a way to figure out, success and failure. Everything else is up to your imagination and working together. So I would like to try that in a more well-established system sometime. That would be fun.
So, I think, setting expectations first, and then my brain goes into the nitty, crunchy mechanical side, and I think all you're really going to need to do is take well-known signpost, quote-unquote, monsters. So, like, Town Guard, you have an assumption of roughly how strong they are. So take, in your little thing for Town Guard, look for a stat block of something weaker than a Town Guard that's roughly similar in combat style. And then slap the name Town Guard on the weaker thing.
Yep.
Right? And then for, let's say, an adult, I don't know how much you want to scale down, right? But adult Red Dragon, you literally just erase the adult and put an ancient. I feel like you maybe increase the size just to kind of fit with the feel, but don't change any of the other mechanics.
Yeah.
I feel like with just a little work renaming and maybe like a slight additional homebrew of mechanics, you could just like, the whole thing of how like hermit crabs will line up on a beach next to shells of varying sizes?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Right, and then they'll keep testing until they find just the right size so they can all like shift into the next one.
Yes.
I'm imagining that, but you're like downgrading all of these different things into slots where other things existed. And if something was, say, like CR 1/4, using those terms, and you got to downgrade it even more, you literally never have them roll for fighting, you just tell them they win.
Well, that's where minions come in, and things like that can be useful.
Yeah.
For telling those epic stories, too, and setting those epic scenes.
Yeah. And then I think for maybe if you want something to be beyond their skill or power level face in a direct sense, like rederiving that into like skill challenges of like, okay, we brewed some dragon's bane. And then like as a community, we, using the Hobbit movies, because they're what's in my head right now, that giant ballista crossbow-esque.
Yes.
Right, but like as a community making something like that, or as a party, or right, that would be the next set of skill, or finding someone who can, or right, and like doing those sorts of things to get the path to fighting it. Obviously, it could be, depending on the scale, you could even have like a werewolf be at the level more skill challenge than direct fight, if you want to make a werewolf a terrifying monster in this.
Well, and on the flip side, going off the minion thing too, I was thinking that's an interesting, easy reflavor, is you keep a single stat block, but it represents more than one creature. So that when the players defeat that stat block in the narrative description, you're taking on like 4 or 5 of them. So one character comes in, mathematically, it's only beating one stat block of a creature, but descriptively, you paint a picture of them taking on like 4 or 5 at once. You know, just the one player's got 4 or 5 around him. This other player is taking on this 4, but mathematically,
that'll instantly make you feel epic.
Right.
I think that's mechanically, which is what we're kind of diving into now. Mechanically, the way you can do that with those systems too, is having those things and assigning them like 4E did, roles. Keep your generic striker, keep your generic tank, and you keep your generic mage. And you just, because most systems have basic attributes that are what that thing's going to do, and those will have a usual set of values at each level. Just make, because that means you only have to have 20 of each. And you can just say, okay, I've got 1 through 20 of a tank, and 1 through 20 of this, and 1 through 20 of that. You don't have to do it all at once. I'm not saying that. Because that is, you know, depending on how many roles you have, if you have 5 roles, that's 100 NPCs. But really, it's not. It's just 100 stats. That's it. And you can use them, keep them on index cards. Because if all you're doing is flavoring it, just grab your index cards that represent them, This is a level 1 striker, level 1 this, level 1 that. And you could keep those and just say, okay, that means that this has a 15, 16, blah, 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 blah. And if there's no bonuses, strip it down. Don't even write it down. You don't even have to write it down. Because, especially in systems where you can't try if you don't have, and by that I mean if you can't try to do something if you don't have something in it, like a skill, then you don't have to worry about even recording it. They do that all the time in their bestiaries and stuff. That's how they write their stat blocks concisely. There's nothing wrong with that for those type of things. Now, I'm the type of person that likes to build out entire character sheets for those type of things, but that's just me. You do not have to do that. The keeping that little repertoire of just roles means that, roles that something plays, like even if you just did classes, you have that option ready at your fingertips for those minions. And those minions could be strong, or those opponents I should say, and you can have them really strong or not. Open Legend, you have this many points, and usually you've got that simple build: 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 2.
Yep.
And if you have that at level 1, you can say, okay, a 5 is this, a 5 is a 2d6, a 3 is this, a 3 is that, a 2 is that, and so on and so forth. And that means you can run it right out of your head. Or you can just look at another character sheet and be like, okay, that's a 2d6 there, or that's that, and that. It doesn't really matter if it's all down and recorded, as long as you keep track of the hit points. There's nothing keeping you from just taking those basic builds and saying it has it in this, 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 and this. Like, this mage is an energy mage. And you just decide that, because that's a 5, 4, 3, 2, 2. Using Open Legend as our example again. Well, it's going to have a 5 there. So it's going to have a 5 in its energy, because that's what it's using to attack. And then those 4, 3, 2, 2 can go anywhere else it needs to. And you can just keep those referenced. There's also the idea of ad hoc damage, which is useful if you don't want to bother rolling for an entire big arm, a bunch of minions. So you can say there's this many minions, they each do about this much damage, and you can spread that across an entire group of characters if you want to. And just say, okay, in this event, you guys are facing down these waves, this horde of goblins or this horde of kobolds, and they hit you for, let me see, there's this many of them, and they each do about this much. So you each take this much damage, and you can keep it fast and moving. And I think that's where some epicness can start to fall away when people are trying to play those epic stories. Combat can bog down. It's hard to run a massive amount, like a full army coming against your characters if you're doing this heroic fantasy. This huge army coming against your characters and then mowing through them.
Right.
Distributing ad hoc damage instead, an average of ad hoc damage, can help mitigate a lot of that bloat that can happen. As well as, giving the bad guys more than one round in combat too. Spreading it out. That's very useful.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Now,
sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, because
I might derail it.
Mechanical. Well, you won't derail lore. That's what I was going to get into.
Oh, fair enough. No, because I was almost going to flip it, because I do like Levi's suggestion too of the low-level characters in an epic place with the Lord of the Rings example or something like that. I think that would be really interesting to try out too. I have not tried that before. I don't know if you guys have any experience with that or thoughts on that too, but I really like that idea. It's very attractive to me in being this kind of ordinary person in an extraordinary world. Because I think a lot of times right now in stories these days, it's extraordinary people in ordinary worlds.
Mm-hmm. Power fantasies.
And yeah.
Instead of the fantasy being the fantasy.
Right.
So,
so flip side of that, same kind of thing, but the flip side of what Levi was talking about.
Well, we're kind of going to be going into that in our second chat.
Fair enough.
So no spoilers for you guys that are watching. So,
I like that. No, that's good. Yeah, let's talk about it in the second chat. That's a great idea.
All right, and we're coming up on pretty close to time anyway. So do you guys have... I'm going to talk about some incorporating lore. So you guys think about your final remarks while I finish up talking about that. So incorporating an epic lore into those low levels, you can do that. Even you can take things like the Faerun and the Sword Coast or Golarion or any of those pre-existing ones. You can actually take them and tell epic stories in them at low levels. You're best served if you divorce the lore from the mechanics, though. So, mentions of specific spell names that the bad guys are using, just reflavor them as their own spell names, or, don't even mention the spell names. Because unless somebody's doing counterspell, it doesn't really matter anyway. But if you do that, it doesn't really matter if they're facing a Demi-Lich that's supposed to be level 14 and they're level 5. That doesn't really matter because you're not telling them that. Those aren't important. You've already got stats for the thing that you're using the Demi-Lich for. You've already adjusted all that. These stats are the Demi-Lich now. Kind of like Levi was saying, that you just scaled something down to meet their level instead of the level being there. And this is assuming that you're telling an epic story on purpose and that it's not one of those things of you wandering around in a sandbox, because then it kind of is important to have high level deadly things. And you still can, but you have to communicate that clearly in a different way now if you are reflavoring things. You have to... it requires a bit more clearer communication with your group when you're saying, hey guys, this is Archimon the Wizard. He's... I know in the lore he's supposed to be like a level 15 wizard, but don't worry about it. He's Archimon. Just think about him as Archimon, and you know he's a powerful wizard, so don't go messing with him. Right? You've heard the stories. It actually makes a lot more mystery for your players if they don't know who you're talking about. Or they don't know what you're talking about. They know who you're talking about, but they don't know what stats he has. That adds a lot more mystery. And maybe they get surprised when they find out, hey, we've actually surpassed him on our power. But they didn't know that because they are wrapped up in the story instead, because they had fun with the story. So, lots of options in that. And lots of options for changing around lore characters even. So long as you clearly communicate to your players what's happening. So, that's my thing. Any final thoughts from y'all?
I was thinking just... I think the thing we're talking about, other than the communication with the players, is having fun with the descriptions and letting yourself be creative. And it actually could be a good thing for practicing your, on-the-fly creative stuff of just having those those simple cards for enemies and having each situation where you're just reflavoring it and trying to think outside the box with that. So I think it would actually be a really good practice, even if you have a regular group and you want to do a one shot in this type of thing, just for some ad lib practice. And I always say, try it.
Yeah,
go do it. Tell us how it goes.
Tell us how it goes in the comments. All right. Any final remarks from you, Levi?
Just that this discussion had made me curious about the concept of making epic levels mundane. I like the idea of a 20th level wizard who's like not allowed to use magic in other circumstances, frustrated by the fact that he hasn't figured out his taxes yet this year.
He can't use magic to solve his tax issues.
That's really good.
Well, because any magic on his tax forms counts as tampering.
Right.
Yes.
Even just using magically permanent ink, they don't let you do that. You actually have you have to use mundane ink. You know?
Oh my god.
Because it's a transmutation.
Yes.
Well, yeah.
He doesn't even remember how to write. Because he hasn't actually done it. So
yeah, his pen that he has filled, his auto-writing pen writes for him, his auto-scribe. So he's got this auto-scribe running this whole time, and he can't, like, wait. His penmanship is horrible. It's like doctored penmanship.
Yes.
The epic level fighter is spending his entire day trying not to destroy local things on accident. His body is just so finely honed that if he is not careful, he will like stretch and like rip a door off its hinges.
Yeah. He just pulls the door normally for him. He's so used to ripping stuff off, you know. Like,
yes.
It's like, I was trying to be gentle there.
Yeah.
It's the whole Superman problem, you know? The world around me is cardboard. Well, we hope you've enjoyed our chat about epic stories without epic levels and telling them, and our ideas on how you might do that and different ways you can flavor it, whether you want epic stories or you want more down-to-earth stories with epic tales in them. Next chat, we'll be discussing normal characters in a fantastic world. And hopefully that will arouse some creative visions for you as well. But until then, travelers, we hope that you have enjoyed. You can find the Interplanar Crossroads and Avenue Studios on Rumble or YouTube. And you can also find Interplanar Crossroads on BitChute if you use that instead. You can support us both through our Patreons or Patreons or locals. There we go.
So many options.
Yeah. Or contact us directly. I mean, you can contact him directly and do something,
Sure.
or me. So, as always, have a great day. God bless and enjoy. Bye.
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 This content was made possible by travelers and viewers like you. Thank you.
Yeah, just the idea of an epic level mundane slog one-shot.
Yeah.
Just as like a comedy one-shot. I think it'd be funny to try.
Yeah.
Just as kind of the antithesis, but still fun, of the point of this episode.
Oh man, playing retired superheroes who have to be really careful. Like, they're retired now.
Yes.
You know, they don't want to be working anymore. Their proteges have come up and all that type of stuff, and you know, it's fine. They don't even need to. The proteges are handling it. Well, how are they handling their everyday life now? What do they do?
Yeah. Like, Cyclops, his like vision's going bad, so he couldn't see its aim even if he wanted to, but he's got to wear those thick sunglasses.
Yes.
And instead of his cool visor, he's got these big Coke bottle glasses now.
Yeah.
Walking around with his
more
walker.
Yeah, he's got like lab safety goggle looking things because he needs the elastic on the back so they can't just get flopped off.
Yeah. And they have to stay on. Sometimes he'll forget sometimes he goes around and there's been one or two incidents where he's lost them, and it's been like he forgets to close his eyes. It's like, where is it? And they're like, I don't know.
Or even if he remembers, I like the idea that he like has regular sneezes or coughs.
And the glasses just fly out a little bit and flop back onto his face.
Well, or even like he has the glasses off and he like, there's the sneeze and there's the and then your eyes open with that end afterwards. and it's almost involuntary for him.
Stop
Like-
sneezing up there. He's got to live in. He's got to live in a ruby encased room.
Yeah.
Just so he doesn't
Yes.
blow through stuff.
Right.
All right, we're going on tangents.
Yeah. Basically, I felt like everything that was in my head that wasn't stated by you all was stated by me already, and I just had a funny thought. So I'm good.
Beautiful.
All right.
It's so weird to not be getting kicked out.
I know. That
I'm
is
just so
nice.
used to it now.
Discord's the opposite. If there's not enough people, Adam gets kicked out.
Yeah.